Welcome, welcome, welcome. And thank you for joining us on another episode of today's Electrical Estimating. I'm your co-host, Chris Trommer, and we're picking up from our last episode, still touching base on tariffs and what's happened for the last year. This time, taking a look at how tariffs affect pricing combined with other outside forces. So we're talking about inflation, supply and demand, shortages. How does this all combine into the increased pricing we've seen over the last year? Are tariffs really driving that cost, or are there outside forces that are also playing a factor here to drive those costs up higher? So, with this conversation, Keith does a great job of breaking down how tariffs came into play over the last year, how they've set baselines, how outside forces have driven prices either up or down, depending on what's going on. It really gives a clear understanding are tariffs that main force that's driving our increased costs? Thank you for joining us again. If this is your first time listening, please hit that subscribe button, and we'll be back with you with our next episode in the very near future. Take care. Talking to contractors that we have, estimators, and procurement managers, and business owners, they're still seeing material price increases right now. As we talked about, looking at tariffs, sometimes if they're in that 10, 15, possibly 20% range, it could be dissipated by the time it moves down the channel to that actual end user. Manufacturer maybe picks up different shipping. Maybe they don't ship as much, so the shipping cost isn't as much. Maybe they ship more, so it goes down. Maybe transportation. There's so many factors, and we went through them before that can account to taking a little bit off here and there to where it's not as felt towards the end. But we're still seeing increased prices. I can tell you for certain, me as a homeowner going to a Home Depot and buying product, I've seen increased prices from when I first moved into this house 7 years ago to going and buying receptacles that I need for 2 rooms right now. And I can see the prices going up. How much of that price increase that we've seen recently is realistically attributed to tariffs? Or is there other market forces? Because obviously we lived through the pandemic, we lived through it after prices went up. Prices really didn't go back down after they went up. I don't think they ever go back down once they go up. And then, tariffs came in and everybody was afraid and they were saying, my price is going up. It's all about tariffs. Realistically, still in your opinion, how much of this price increase can be said it's all tariffs, 50% tariffs, or there's a lot of other market forces that are driving your prices up?
And the one thing to learn about tariffs, that tariffs are what we call a one-time market adjustment. Okay, so companies, you had talked a little bit about companies that were waiting to pass on tariffs to the end consumer, and then eventually they kind of get to the point where they have to, right? Once they do that pass on, that's a one-time market adjustment, and then after that, it will be non-tariff forces that drive prices up. So when we had a 20 or 30% increase in copper tariffs, that hit last, July or so, when the first 232s got put into place, a lot of those market adjustments were done in that period of time over the next quarter or so. So we work through old inventories that didn't have the tariff applied. We order new stuff, carries the tariff. Typically, you'll make that market adjustment at that time. You'll either pass it on or you start to eat it as long as you can.
Yeah.
And then we spread out that market adjustment. But bottom line, most of those adjustments have been done. So now what we're looking at is we go back to old school supply demand kinds of dynamics. All right. And we're saying, okay, well, yeah, there's been, a problem at a copper mine down in South America, and now that's pushed the price up 10%. Or we've seen a problem with supply chain or demand in Europe, and so that pushes it down 5%. We're probably back to that point in time on copper. Now, again, with the tariff policy changing on us, we've got to go through this ripple where, we're going to go through a period of time where we've got to adjust to the new 122s. A lot of those adjust down. So you should be seeing some tariff relief, to be honest with you, from some countries in the near term. And then we'll see what the brand new policy is, and you see that maybe they adjust up. So again, period of uncertainty coming up. But I would just say one more thing, fundamentally, just for everyone to understand, is that a lot of prices in construction are what we call elastic. So if we, they're flexible in the sense that if you apply prices that are too high for too long, what happens is you kill demand. And as you kill demand, then the demand for those products drops and the price of those products drop. So they're elastic, they stretch and they contract, they stretch, they contract. Gasoline is that way. Okay, gasoline prices go up and we get to the point where they hit a threshold where they're too high. We stop driving, gasoline demand drops, and gasoline price comes down. Diesel's a little different. Diesel, I still want my retail products, and I don't think about the fact that a truck using diesel is delivering them. And so diesel is less elastic. You got to have diesel. You got to get the products to market. I got to eat. And so as those prices go up, it pushes inflation up with it. And it's not elastic. It doesn't just suddenly revert back. We have to eat those costs longer. Okay. So again, I know I threw a lot at you there, a lot of even economic concepts, but that's important because when we think about copper, we think about wiring, we think about all those costs that we're using. They can be elastic. They can get high enough that those projects get killed. You don't see them launch.
Yeah.
And demand goes down, those suppliers panic, and they start dropping the price to build activity and get sales, and then off we go.
When we talked last year, there was a lot of conversation. There was a lot of uncertainty with people that were saying, it's going to drive my prices up. It's going to make everything more expensive, especially if you look at it, if the price fully got passed down. If you're paying $1 for a widget and there's a 20% tariff on it and it passed on, now you're looking at $1.20. Well, if you use 10,000 widgets on a project, that 20 cents is going to add up pretty quickly for you.
That's right.
Um, Basically, what you're saying here is, let's just say, with my analogy, it is $1.20, but the tariff's taken full effect, and now that's sort of become what the market price is with the tariff. And any fluctuation after that is going to be attributed to inflation or supply chain issues or supply and demand or world event or something like that, because we've already set the baseline for the tariff. That's taken hold. The time has gone by where that's now the minimum. And now what we're looking at is outside forces that are going to be changing that price to keep it going up or go up.
That's it. That's it.
So, and I think you just alluded to, something else, that tariffs are going to sort of influence inflation and overall cost in our economy. But it seems like it's when they're more certain in understanding to where it's, hey, it's 10%. We all get used to the 10%. It sets a new baseline. We can move forward. Inflation adjusts for overall cost adjusts for, that's where we're at. But it seems like with the uncertainty that we're seeing and it making the markets uncertain and it's making, well, hell, everybody's uncertain, that it's causing us to not really have that baseline of sorts. And that's why we're seeing inflation that's going from, lows that the administration was talking about months ago to now we're looking at possible 5% next month because of outside forces. And then that's why we're seeing overall cost of items sort of fluctuate because the tariffs haven't really set that baseline of what their numbers should be and they haven't held true. So we can't make a new baseline. So the market forces mixed with tariff are really causing this up and down that we're seeing with that uncertainty of pricing. Is
Yeah.
that
I mean, yeah,
and
no, you nailed it. You nailed it. And the Supreme Court ruling from that perspective was devastating, only because it extended the uncertainty deeper into 2026. We kind of knew coming into the end of the year, if the Supreme Court had just said, okay, what you did was probably the wrong use of that policy, but you could have used other policies. So what we're going to do is slap you on the wrist and say, don't do it again. The reciprocal tariffs need to go away. So get these legal documents ratified. You have a period of time to do that. But we're just going to let it go. If they had done something like that, we would have been in a brand new tariff regime. We would have already absorbed that initial market adjustment, and off we go. I'll give you a real world example. So the Federal Reserve is one of the more conservative thinking groups, probably in the country, maybe in the world, and there are hundreds of analysts. When they were looking at the impact of inflation last year, we saw their expectations for inflation somewhere around 3% because of the tariff impact. For 2026, they were projecting inflation would plummet to about 2.3, 2.4%, almost at their target rate of 2%. And then by next year, they were going to be at 2.1. because of the Supreme Court decision and now the uncertainties with the 122s and then the follow-up 301s, they've now adjusted their inflation expectation to 2%, and that does not include what would happen with the war and the duration of the war. And so you're talking 2.7 and north. And so again, we would have already been in an operating environment now where we would have a pretty good firm idea what prices were going to be like, what the tariff regime would look like, and we'd be moving forward with our plans. And now we're dealing with the uncertainty.
So if we had kept the tariffs that were in place at the time, and like them, love them, hate them, whatever you think about them, we would have actually been to absorb those to a point to where inflation would have started going down because our economy would have started adjusting to these prices there because companies would have been able to understand what the tariffs are. They would have had certainty. They can start trying to ease the inflation of pricing for the tariffs by, like you said before, changing packaging, changing shipping routes, making adjustments so that the end user doesn't feel the whole total cost of that. We could have kept going forwards, but now this sort of turns everything upside down and we're back to square one and we're back to being uncertain. So that's another, trying to find the word, but something that's going to affect the price of all of our goods because of this uncertainty. It's gonna possibly drive inflation, drive costs up. Nobody really knows what's going to happen next.
Absolutely. And now we've got uncertainty because you've got some people gaming it, thinking, okay, at 10 or 15%, that's the lowest it's going to be for a while. I better inbound as much as I can right now and get it in before July. Because once those 301s hit, my tariff regime is going to be very different. I mean, I have to think of it that way. I don't know what it'll be. It could just be 10%. It could be 15% more permanently applied, but I don't know. It could be
Yeah.
25 or 30. And that's what, so everyone's game planning now, trying to, well, it's really war gaming at the moment, trying to figure out what to do. I talked to a supplier the other day that does, okay, weird, but doll clothing, right? And they were ordering from a very specific Asian country. And they were like, okay, we're just going to order a year's worth of supply and try to get it to arrive in the US before June because I just don't know. And I've got the cash. I'm going to go do that. Whereas his competitor's saying, okay, I think I'll wait. I'll wait and we'll run lean. I'll save cash and then I'll just order in the environment afterwards. And so we're going to be dealing in economic terms with a very disparate type of market where we've got two companies, same industry, same product, two very different strategies, and they're going to have two very different, potential pricing regimes. So